So hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening from whatever time zone you may be joining us in from today. Thank you again. My name is Rebecca Cronin, and I'm one of the customer success managers here with the Altair Data Analytics team. Now, some of you might recognize my voice or name from either receiving some complimentary onboarding sessions with our customer success team, or perhaps seeing my name within the user community. Our team here is just another point of contact into Altair. If you're unable to get a hold of your account manager, don't hesitate to reach out to us for assistance. As well as if you haven't had the opportunity to connect to our user community platform and you need access, please let us know and we can help you get connected. Little housekeeping, you should see a handouts panel. In there, I have attached today's PowerPoint presentation. It also has some helpful links that we'll show later towards the end of the session today. It has our kw-csm@altair.email for our customer success team. So again, please download that for your reference. So again, we're excited that you're joining us here today for our Ask the Expert session. Today's topic that was voted from our previous was the Analyze tab and summaries. So for any questions that you have, and it does not have to be about this specific topic, you could have it not only with the regular DPS or the classic desktop interface, you could also ask questions about Monarch server, as we also call it, Automator. You should see that question panel there again on the side. So feel free to ask any questions that you're hoping to review. If it's something that you would like to have addressed offline, private, then please make that comment within that question and we'll save it personally to reach out to you later. Otherwise, we're going to share it broadly with everyone that's here today because it might be a question that they too also have. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our expert today. It is Steve Kales. He's one of our senior professional service consultants. Now, some of you might have had the benefit of working with Steve with some professional service engagements or perhaps seen him participate within the user community. He has over nearly 30 years of technical support experience, which majority of it being with our former Data Watch and our Altair team today. So with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand presenter over to Steve so we could jump right into our topic discussion. So give me 1 second. Let's turn it over to you, Steve.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so hopefully you can see the login screen there for Automator.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So yeah, as Rebecca mentioned there, the topic today is the summaries or the Analyze tab, as it's called in Data Prep Studio. But I just wanted to quickly recap on a question that we had in the session a fortnight ago. When I read the question out, I didn't quite get the full context of it, so I wanted to clarify the situation. So the question was around using part of a file name in an export. And I think when I read the question, I took that into account. But when I answered the question, I possibly didn't explain the part of. And the answer is very different depending on whether you're using the entire file name or just part of the file name. So I'm just waiting for Automator to log in. Okay. So it could relate to standard processes as well to a certain extent, but I'll describe it in the visual process. I think it's a little bit more graphical. So the question was around how do we use part of a file name in the output file name. So the example I'll go through quickly here is you can see we've got a Feb, Jan, and March, and we want to use just part of it. So in this case, the FEB Jan or MAR. I think specifically the question might have been about a date segment of a file name, but the same principle will apply. The thing I missed out when I was answering it is that if you only want to use the entire name, so if you want to call your output file class feb.csv or class feb.xlsx, it's extremely easy to do that, and I think I probably missed that a couple of weeks ago. So we have a file input. You can see in this case it's just the class jan.prn. We've got a workspace that does nothing special at all. This could equally be a classic model file. You don't need to do any calculated fields or anything in there to extract the file name. It's all actually done automatically as part of the data prep export or the table or the summary export. So on any of the export options from either Data Prep Studio or Classic, when you edit the file name, you'll see there's a button on the end here where you can get to the naming macros. One of those naming macros that's globally available is the input file name. And you see if you select that, that just changes to this ampersand input name and then whatever file extension you want to create. So without doing anything in the model or the workspace, I can automatically call the file classjan.csv in this case, because I'm only inputting a single classjan on the input. So let me just check the output folder here, make sure there's nothing in there. Which there already is, so just going to delete that to keep it tidy. So if I run this process without the anything else in there, you'll see once the process is complete, in just a second or two, as long as I've got the file I need, it's automatically created classjan.csv. So very easy if you want to use the entire file name in the output. The question was specifically, how do you use part of the file name? And it gets a little bit more complicated on that one. So the solution I started showing is valid in some circumstances. And I talked about creating a calculated field in Classic using the file function. Then you can use whatever manipulation you like in your table to extract the specific piece that you're looking for. And then again, when you export it, there is a macro available to use the first value of that field name. So there's two disadvantages to doing it that way. One is that you have to create the calculation in your Classic model, and the other problem is that functionality is not available in a workspace. So there's a fairly small scripted solution that I think is probably a better solution. So I'm just going to attach the script in here. The script is not particularly long, as you can see, but in fact, actually, this is doing quite a few other things as well. In terms of a minimum script, all you need are these 3 lines, and 2 of the lines are put in for you. So the first thing you do is you do this insert script, iterate through a list of output items. And you can see that puts in this for and next line, which I've already got in there, so that was a duplicate. And then the only thing you need to do is to add this sort of central line to manipulate the file name. So in this case, you can see the item is the file you've exported, so the full path of the file you've exported as a string. So in this case, I'm taking a substring at it, starting at 52 characters and extracting 7 characters. So that's going to turn it, and in this case, it's going to just take that segment from it. So if we see here, I'll just delete that file again and run it one more time. If I can get back there quick enough. So you should see the class Jan pop up there. There's a 3-second delay in that script as well. So just so we can see it change, and then you see it changes to the jan.csv. So just to quickly go through that. You can see that, so first of all, there's a 2-second delay just so we can see it working. Obviously, that's not necessary. So the bit that's actually doing the work in this case is just the for line and the next line and this rename. So you can see it's renaming the original file name to the new file name. So those 2 variables are being set there. The only problem with literally just having that is that you can't see in the log file what it's actually doing. So you may want to use this API add event, which actually create something in the log file for you. Also, if you wanted to use that somewhere else, maybe in an email distribution or in an event log distribution, you can actually set these sort of global automator variables to the contents of whatever you're working out here. So by sort of using this instead of just the 3-line straightforward option, you get a couple of extra options available to you. So let me just, oh, it's going to fail, sorry, because I've already got the file there. So you would obviously have to have a slightly better script in there that didn't fail. I think I got it just in time. Yeah. So if we look at the log file here, you can see this is the script. So if you don't have this API add event, literally all you'd see here is that the script started and the script completed. If the script failed for some reason, like there was already a file there with the same name, then you'd see an error message here, but you wouldn't have any information feedback. So this API, this log entry here is created from this API add event. You also see there that script has set these original file and new file API variables, which means we can then send an email or create a log distribution. So here, for example, although it actually says send email as a text description, it's not for this test. It's just creating a Windows event log. So again, that Windows event log or the body of an email or whatever you want it to be can make use of those variables. So yeah, I just wanted to recap that to give a slightly fuller explanation than the one I gave a couple of weeks ago. Okay, let's make my way out of this one. So onto the topic for today, which is summaries and the Analyze tab. So we use the two different names for it, but they are very similar functionally. So I'll start off in Classic, where we call it the summary window. There's a model already built here, as you can see, but the model really is not doing anything particularly useful at the moment. And in Classic, we have the 3 windows. We have the report window where we define all of our extraction templates. There's nothing special happening there. We have the table window, and the only thing that's happening in this table window, other than displaying what's being extracted, is the composer is being split into 2 different fields. So you can see it's a single field in the report, and it's being split on the comma into the composer in the title field. And there are no summaries at the moment. There is a filter. So if you notice here, there are some rows with a negative value on it, and there are 91 rows in the table. There's a filter that is called no returns, and that just filters out the negative values in the amount. So no returns, you'll see those values are not there, and there we have 88 rows in the table. I'm just going to turn this back to no filter, and you can see they've come back in again. So into the summary window. So the summary window is all about working out totals or minimums, maximums, averages per category. So we can aggregate any numeric field. So we have 3 we can look at here: the amount, the unit cost, and the quantity. And we can aggregate those by any single or multiple key combination. So for instance, we could do something like total sales per media type. I mean, this quick run through we'll do, on the first one, we'll do total sales by composer. So you can see there are lots of different composers, but there is repetition. So we have a bar talk right at the bottom of the table, and we have another entry right at the top of the table. So we certainly should see less than the 91 rows when we get into our summary window. And of course, we're going to ask it to add up the total amount of sales, so the 3596 and the 1078 and any others that appear for that line will get added together. So into the summary window. We don't have any summaries at the moment. So the first thing we do is go into the summary design, where we can add a new summary. So either this button at the top here, or as there's nothing there taking up this space at the moment, we can click to add a new summary here as well. This takes us into the definition window for the new summary we're creating. So let's give it a name of sales by composer. And this supply filter is quite important. So the default setting is to apply the default filter. So this means whatever is applied at the time in the table is going to be applied to the summary. So you could get however you like to look at it, dynamic or possibly inconsistent results, depending on how your table is filtered. So if you don't want that possibility, you can specify either no filter or whatever filters you have predefined. So in this case, if I select no returns, it doesn't matter. The fact I'm showing returns in the table window won't matter, because it's going to override that and always apply the no returns filter. And let's insert a total line. So that's all I'll do on the definition. We then go on to add remove fields. And we'll start off with pretty much the minimum, really, that we can have in a summary, which is to choose one key field and one measure. So the key field is how we want to group things together, or how we want to aggregate the measures. So we're looking for total sales for each composer. So composer is my key field. So I can either single click and hit key, or if it's a character field, we can't add up a character field, so it will assume that a character field is a key, and I can just double click on it. So the composer goes in, as you see, to the key field. For each composer, we're looking to total up or sum the sales, which is the amount field. And again, because it's a numeric field, it's going to assume that I want that as a measure. You can use numeric fields as keys if you wish. So that's it for now. This is going to give me a sum. You can see the default calculation is to sum the sum of amounts for each composer. So let's just accept that. And you can see we've gone from our 91 rows, I think it was, or 88 with the filter applied, down to 77. So there is a little bit of summarization going on, but not a great amount. But the most important thing to remember is that this Bartok line, we know we had at least 2 lines for Bartok. And this is now, of course, an addition of all the lines for each composer. By default, it's going to be alphabetical by the key fields. So I guess one of the reasons for doing a summary typically is because you want to see the most or the least significant records by whatever keys you're selecting. So typically, rather than having it alphabetical by key, you might want to see this in maybe the descending amount. So that's the first thing we'll look at here is reordering the table. It can be tempting, of course, to export the data at this stage to Excel and do the sorts and all those sorts of things in Excel, but of course that leaves you having to do that repeating work each time. If we can get it done within the model file, then we can cut down any repetitive work, or hopefully completely eliminate any repetitive work that we might be thinking about in Excel. So to reorder or to do anything to the composer column, so we're reordering the composer column based on the amount. We actually double click on the composer column, not the amount column. That's just something you have to get used to, unfortunately, but it does make sense when you see all the other options that are available. So we could go back into summary design and edit, or we can just double click on the column we want to change. So I'm going to double click on composer. And you can see this gives us lots of tabs. The advantage of double clicking, of course, is it takes us directly into the correct field. So we're modifying the composer field. We'll go on to the sorting tab. And rather than sorting alphabetically by the field, which is the default, in this case, we want to go by the measure amount, and we'll make it descending. And then accept that. And then, as you'd expect, now we've got our most successful composer at the top of that list. So that's one option. We've got the sorting option. This is still quite a long list. So imagine the situation where the total is very important to you, but you don't want to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the table to get to that total line. Maybe you're only interested in the top 5 or the top 10 composers, but you still want to see the grand total. So that's an option we can do using the matching tab. So again, I'm going to double click on the composer. It'll take me into the properties for the composer, and this time go on to the matching tab here. And by default, we match all values, so every individual composer is going to have a line of its own. And in this case, we can use the first n values and then specify the number of values you want, so 10, whatever you may want. You can change the text label for the all others if you want to. And what this allows us to do is to get a more targeted summary. So we're going to see the breakdown for the first 10 values. Let me just try accept again. And you're still going to see the grand total. So this total is still the same because we have this all others category. So anybody that's not in the top 10 goes into the all others category. One slight side note to mention is you'll notice the top 10 has given me 11 rows here. That's because it's the top 10 unique amounts, and we just so happen to have a tie for 10th place. If it was a tie for 5th place, exactly the same would apply. So there are 10 unique amounts here. It just so happens that in this case, we've got 2 composers that have the same amount. And that's why we get the 11 records there. So the top n values allows you to see a fixed number of rows or a fixed number of unique amounts. The other option you can do is to have a threshold. So for example, again, it's done through the matching tab. Let's go back into the composer column and onto the matching tab. So rather than just choosing the top 10, I only want to see the more significant values. So maybe everything that has an amount of greater than 100, for example. So of course, I don't know how many rows that's going to be, and that's going to change dynamically depending on the values. So again, we've got the all others, which now of course contains a different number of rows. Our grand total is staying the same all the time. So the level of breakdown you get is configurable by selecting the matching tab. The other option you've got on matching is probably not that relevant for the composer, but you can do specific values. So in the matching here, you can do values from table, and then I could select exact matches or value contains matches for a list that I can manually maintain here. So if you only ever want, I don't know, German composers, for example, you could type all of your, I think Beethoven's probably Austrian, but you could type all your composer names in there that you wanted to see separately and sort of manually cherry pick just the values that you want. Okay. So that's the first sort of set of examples on a very simple summary. We'll take a look at expanding the summary in a different direction, and that's probably best done on a different summary. So I'm just going to accept that and build a slightly different summary, this time based on customer. So I've already got my sales by composer. We can just go into summary design. We can now add a summary. You can have as many different summaries as you like. And this one's going to be sales by composer. Did I call that? I called the first one sales by composer. Sorry, that should have been, yes, this should be sales by customer. Sorry, sales by customer. Okay, so we'll start off in a similar way. We'll just start with go into the add remove fields. And start with the same sort of scenario. We'll have the composer as a key. We'll have the amount as a measure. So effectively, that's the same structure as the first one we started with. And I'm sorry, I meant to choose customer there rather than composer. So I'll go back and change that in a moment. But what we should be looking at here is an alphabetical list of customers with amounts rather than composers. So let me go and change that as we make some more changes to it. So I'm going to go back into the add remove fields, as the name suggests, if I want to remove a meal I've made a mistake. So I'm going to remove the composer and instead add the customer back in as a key. Also, while we're here, let's add a second measure. So I'm going to add the quantity. And again, you can have as many different measures as you like. So similar structure, but this time we've got the 2 different measures. So of course we could go in and use all those matching tabs and do the same sort of thing again, but I'll sort of expand the summary in a different way in this case. So we can have as many different measures as you like and as many different keys as you like. One of the impacts of adding keys is that you can no longer see the top level key at the same time. So if we come in and do an add remove fields, we're breaking it down by customer, which of course gives us customer totals. If I now break that customer down into, for example, the media type, we can now see the individual breakdowns, so we know the amounts for each media type per customer, but we've now lost the value of these 3 added together. So we've got a couple of different options. If we're manually interrogating the data and we're sort of sat in front of Monarch and we don't want to export the data or use Automator, then we can drill up. We've got this drill up and drill down option here available. So drilling up removes the lowest level key. So I can drill up, it removes the media, and now we're back to the same view that we would have had if we didn't even have that second level key in. So we can see the 50764, or we can drill down and we can see the rows that make up that 50764. But at the moment, we're not seeing both those values in there at the same time. So let's resolve that. So we want to modify the way the customer is displayed by adding a subtotal. So again, I'm going to double click on the customer column. And we'll go into the layout option this time. And we can have header lines, but in this case, we want to add a subtotal line. So I'm going to include a subtotal on each key value change. And just to make it a little bit clearer to read, I'm going to add one blank line after the key value change. Now you can see we get this new subtotal. So now we see the 50764 plus the three values that make that up. So the subtotaling is something that's unique to the table window, and grouping by group values and that sort of thing, or sorting by group values. That's all unique within the summary windows. So this is sort of a typical use. Obviously, if we're in the table window, we sort of see the individual values, but in the summary window, we see the values grouped by whatever grouping level we want. So one thing to bear in mind is the sorting. If you imagine if this was in Excel and I wanted to try and sort this so that my biggest spending customer was at the top, I'd really have to sort of get rid of the subtotals and then do some sort of pivot to re-enable that. But within Monarch, all I have to do is to double click on the customer column and go into the sorting, and because I'm sorting the customer, it's automatically going to keep the grouping levels together. So alphabetical by customer at the moment, I want to go by descending amount. And of course, it hasn't just blindly sorted this amount column, it's taking the total amount. So you can see the biggest spending customers at the top, while the groups get maintained as you go up and down through the values. I'm just checking if there's any questions. No questions at the moment. Okay. So that's sort of a different way of looking at the data. We can also do different calculations. So by default, we've done the sum, but you can change that if you want to. So again, let me just pop into the summary definition. This time, add remove fields. And I'll add quantity another couple of times. So you see as I double click, it pops down into the measure here. So at the moment, we've got 3 columns all doing exactly the same thing. So we'll leave the sum quantity there. I'll double click on that and go to the formula tab. And let's change this one to, for example, max. And these are the options you can do here. So you've got unique values, cumulative counts, maximums and minimums, standard deviations, percent of totals. There's quite a few different aggregations that we've got here that we can do. But we'll stick with max on that one. And in fact, let's get rid of the third quantity. You don't really need the third one there. Going to remove that. But instead we'll do a count. So this count option is always there. Doesn't matter which field you'll count because you're counting the number of rows per key group. So popping back into our summary now, we can see that for CDs we've got 23 total have been sold. The maximum number that we've sold on a single line is 9, and this count here is telling us it's come from 3 different records. So this one's quite relevant. We'll take a look at the item field a little bit in a moment, and this count field here is quite relevant for the item. So if I take a look just at the Betty's Music Store, for example, let's go into the table and do a filter. So that we just see Betty's Music Store in the table. Oh, make it the active filter, sorry. Okay, so you see now the table only contains records for Betty's Music Store. But again, if we go into the summary window here, I've left this on default filter so that this does have an impact. I changed this one back to no returns. So this summary, maybe I didn't, I must have set that on there as well. So let me go in and change that. So leaving it on default filter means whatever I have in the table is going to have an impact. So we saw it went down from all customers just to that individual Betty's Music Store. If I specifically choose the no returns here, for example, even though my table only has the unnamed filter in here, the summary still contains records from all customers. So that's just something to bear in mind, particularly useful if you are automating this, if you're building a model file or a workspace later on that you want to put into an automator process. It can be good to actually specify the filter name rather than leaving it on default filter, because of course you could change that filter 6 months down the road and all of a sudden all of your summaries are impacted when potentially they don't want to be. So one final thing I'll do here is one of the good options we've got in a summary and in the Analyze tab is to change one of the keys to an across key. So at the moment, you can see we're taking up quite a lot of rows for this classic and jazz. Now, there are quite a lot of fields here, of course, but I mean, I really only added these other fields for demonstration purposes. Typically, it might just be the single amount column. So a more efficient way, typically, of showing a summary that has a key with a relatively small number of choices in it is to display those across the page. So I'm going to double click on the media column and again, go to the layout and display those across. What it's done by default is it's knocked it back to the single key, the amount key. So I can choose that and change it, but by default it's on the amount key. And you can see now it's automatically created separate columns for each of these media types, and it's a much more concise way of showing that same data effectively that we would have had just with a single amount measure. I'm just going to change these nulls here to make it a bit easier to read. That's done by going into Home, Options, View, and then you can change the character that you want to show as nulls. And the final thing I want to do here before moving on to the looking at something similar in Data Prep Studio is the coloring options. The coloring options are unique to Classic. So everything that we've seen so far, you can replicate in Data Prep Studio. This next bit is unique to Classic still at the moment. And what this allows us to do is to add coloring exceptions to values. So if we double click on the key field rather than the measure itself. And we go into the coloring tab. We're going to override for selected sections key values. So first of all, if I just select what I want to do here, and I'm going to just maybe give them a different color background. I've done that on the wrong one, sorry. Yep, so I should have clicked on the measure, sorry, not on the key field. So coming into the coloring and the limits, I now select whether I want to do it at the customer level or the customer media level. And again, I'll choose just a slightly darker color blue there, or a different color blue. And you can see we've filled in all of the values in this case with a different color. I didn't apply that to the sum, but there was a tick box to apply that to the sum if you want to. So the real advantage of doing this is that you can highlight exceptional values. So again, if we come into the coloring and the limits, if I now override, I've lost my limits, sorry. My apologies, I was expecting to see the coloring limits here, and I'm obviously in the wrong section. Okay, I may need to come back to this and review this. let me just quickly try one thing.
I think you have to click on show limit checkbox.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. I was looking right past it. I think it's in the heat of the moment. Thank you. It is there though, isn't it?
Yeah, there was.
Yeah, okay, let me go back to measures.
Right.
Measures.
Option?
There it is. Okay, yeah,
there.
Thank you. Okay, I knew that was there. I just couldn't see it in the moment. Thanks, Mo. Okay, so show limits. So what we can do now is we can put in a lower limit of say 100 and an upper limit of, for example, 300. And now we can say the lower limits, for example, can have the same fill or a similar fill, but have some red text on it. And clearly I'm no graphic designer. And then again, we can just do something different for the other limits. Let's make that yellow. And now when we apply it, we can see our everything above 300 is in the yellow, and everything below 300 or everything below 100 is in the red. So yeah, thanks, Mo. So that's the upper limit coloring. So just to mention again, the coloring and of course, therefore, the upper and lower limit coloring is only available in Monarch Classic. So I'm just checking that there's no questions coming in at the moment. So let me close down Classic and review sort of similar options in Data Prep Studio. So as I say, everything apart from the coloring is available in Data Prep Studio. So we've got a similar data set here. I think the only difference really is we don't have the description, the piece of music. But apart from that, there's nothing else going on. And again, there's nothing there's no preparation work in this prepare window that's helping out from this point of view. So in Data Prep Studio, we have two different ways that we can summarize data. We can use the transform window to do quite a lot of it. And we also have the separate analyze window. And where you want to go, obviously, depends on your requirements. So for example, if we're just looking for a very straightforward summary, maybe adding up total sales and quantity by customer, then that may be best done in the transform window. So we can go into transform, we can go into group, and we can just group the customer and select the amount and the quantity, which you can see goes to sum. And this basically is what we would get if we did a similar a similar action in the Analyze tab or the Classic summary. And really, if your summary is relatively straightforward like this, then there's probably not a lot of benefit in going into the Analyze tab. However, the Analyze tab does give you all those other features that we were looking at for the matching, the sorting at group level. So if we broke the customer down into the media type, we could still sort by customer. So our biggest customer was at the top. Whereas if you imagine if this was broken down by customer and media type, if we then sort it, it's going to do the same as Excel in the prepare window. It's just going to blindly sort the sum column. So anything that involves doing extra work on grouping or matching tab and that sort of thing, it is possibly better done through the Analyze window. We've also got options like the pivot. So the across option that we had there with the media going across the top, we can do that through a pivot. So again, if we go into transform and this time pivot, and again, maybe we want to group it by customer, but this time pivot the media column and then maybe select the amount to sum the amount. Okay, so again, very similar to the results, or the same really as the results we'd get by doing this same sort of thing in either the Analyze or the Classic. So the advantage of staying here is that you can you can now sort of join these two tables apart, or you can do further data prep or further transformations on it. So you get more flexibility if you're working in the prepare window, and you can go on to further enhance the data. The disadvantage is you don't get the pure summary type functionalities that you would get in the Analyze tab. So the Analyze tab here, you can see you can start building summaries based on your data set. So if I started to build the summary here, the summary would be based on my already pivoted data. So I'm just going to come back to the main table and build the summary. And just to show you, you have all the same functionality before we finally look at the item field. This is how you would rebuild it. So there's slight differences in the naming convention, but the features are still there. So we have the insert or don't a grand total line, just like we have. And now we have the row, which the row is what we call the key field in Classic. The column is an across key, and then the measure is what we're adding up. So this was called measure in Classic as well. So for instance, if we wanted to do that sort of cross tab with the media type by customer, we choose our customer as a row, we choose our media as a column, whereas in Classic we choose it as a row first and then change the display options to a cross. So a slight difference there, but the end result is the same. And then we would choose our amount as a measure. In fact, I'll choose the quantity as a measure as well, as one of the options we didn't look at in Classic, which we do have available, we can look at here. So now we've got two different things going across. We've got the media as an across column, and we've got the two different measures, which traditionally would be two different columns as well. So by default, we only see one of the measures at a time. So even though you saw we selected the quantity and the amount as measures, we're only looking at the amount here. So when you have multiple measures, you have an option of choosing which measure you look at. So we can look at the amount, or we can look at the quantity, or we can look at both, categorized or grouped together by key. So you can see the key is the media type. So we have amount and quantity for each key. Or we can have both grouped by the measure. So we now have the amounts with all the keys or the quantity with all the keys. So the columns are exactly the same. This 4270 and this 566 are both there, but it's just the ordering of the columns that changes. So that there you see the same two values, but they're both at the end there because that's the total column. So I say this is available in Classic as well. So everything you can do apart from the coloring, you can do in the Analyze tab in Data Prep Studio. So the final thing I wanted to look at is the item field. So I'm going to go back to the main table here again, just in the Prepare window. And what we can see is that we actually have rows that are, apart from the values we might want to add up, the rows are identical. And we can tell that by, we don't need to do this for the operation, but just for illustrations purposes. If I go into Transform Duplicate, I can choose my customer, media, and composer, and I can create a new column that will flag all the duplicates. So there's not many of them. I've chosen the wrong columns there, sorry. Customer, media, composer. Scroll down. Yes, sorry, it's not duplicated within customer. So yeah, we're going to have to ignore the customer for this one. Sorry, let me just come back in again and edit duplicates. So let's get rid of the customer. So let's imagine the customer didn't exist. So what this is showing us here is that obviously we've got duplicate records, media and composer. So clearly we've got Mozart on CD. If we look down through this list, we're going to see that duplicated as well here. So the situation we've got is there's nothing left unique in this table that's going to allow us to see the detail of how it's made up. So we can see all the individual transactions here. If we look for the next CD Mozart line, I'm sure it's in here. Here it is. You can, of course, look at it in the table, and you can see that there's one transaction for 1318 and one transaction for 63. But of course, we can't really do the summary here. So it's sort of, it sounds like you sort of want the best of both worlds, and I guess you do to a certain extent. But if we come into this Analyze tab, and if I build a new summary based on this table, and I want to summarize the, make sure I choose the right fields there. I want to summarize composer and media. And then I want to add up the total amount. Well, that's of course doing exactly what I've asked it to do. If we look at the Mozart CD line, we can see it's added up and we've got the 7618, but we don't know how this 7618 is made up. The only way we're going to know that is to go back into the prepare window and maybe do some filtering or some sorting so that we can see it all together and then sort of manually review that. There's a couple of things we can do to help with this. The first thing we can do is maybe edit the summary, and we can bring in this add count. So at least this is telling us now that we've got 2 rows making up the 7618, but it doesn't tell us what those individual values are. And because we got nothing unique, there's nothing we can do to bring in another key at a lower level that would allow us to see that. But what we can do is to use the item field instead. So if I remove the lowest key as the media and instead bring it in as an item field, what this actually does is you can see it stops the summarization. So this count is always going to be 1 now, no matter how many records we had. But it gives us the ability to see all of the transactions that made up that value for us, the CD, sorry. Mozart CD, these 2 lines here. So there's obviously the 7618 that we were looking at. So sort of what we've done at this stage is reverted back to the prepare window, but of course we now also get the all the other options we've been looking at in the summary window. So for example, we can use the matching tab. If this was a more complex hierarchy, we could sort it by groups so that the parent group got sorted, but all the individual transactions below it didn't. So all of this functionality in the summary window is available to us, but we've maintained the transactional level by using this item field. So it's not something that that we tend to get see very much in Monarch, to be perfectly honest, but it can be really useful if you need that sort of transactional functionality, especially if you want to use the coloring limits, of course. So you might want to apply that coloring limits function that we saw in the classic table or in the classic summary, but at the table level. Well, the only way you can do that is by bringing in an item field, potentially if you don't have unique data, and then you'd get that summary option. So that's the quick review of summaries, the Analyze tab, and potentially the Transform that also has a lot of the functionality in Data Prep Studio. So there's a question that's come in there. How do we use the summaries in Automator? So we can open up Automator again. So it depends on whether it's coming from a classic model or a workspace. It's the perils of running everything on a virtual machine. Forgive me a second. Let's first of all, so if it's a classic model, the same would apply to a standard process. We'll take a look at the visual process to start with. I think I have a classic, yeah. So using models, it's just a case of bringing in on the correct node. So in the classic section, you can see you can choose either a table export or a summary export. So we would just drag the summary export there, connect it. And then any summaries that you have defined in your model, so this already has a summary called burst by customer in this particular model. Any summaries you have become available and you can export those in the normal way. You obviously just choose your destination and what type of file you want to create and all those sorts of things. So that's available in Automator from a model file. If you're exporting, if you already have a standard process or you don't want to use the visual processes for some reason, then I'll just quickly pull that up. So remember, standard processes can only be used to automate classic models. They can't be used to automate a data prep process. So it's part of the project. So you have to have at least one project for a standard process, but you can, of course, have more. And as you step through the wizard, so we go to the exports, we create a new export, or of course edit an existing export, and you can see here again you get to choose whether you export the table or the summary. So as long as you have a summary available in the model file, it will be grayed out if you don't. Then you can just go through and choose the summary you want. So all of those coloring options, all of the across keys, all the subtotals, they are all supported if you're exporting to things like PDF or Excel. Obviously, if you're exporting to CSV or Access or something like that, then the coloring is not maintained. And you even have options, for example, for the coloring, you can either export it as fixed coloring, or you can export it as coloring, conditional coloring, so that if you're manually editing the data in Excel, the colors would get updated with the new values. So that's an option as you go through here. I think the last page gives you the option whether you want to choose that or not. So that's from a model. Let's just quickly go into the workspace. And in the workspace, you see we don't have a distinct export for summary, but in the export wizard here, you see you have the summary export option here. So I'm not sure if this workspace does have any summaries, to be honest, but if it does, they would appear here. So yes, it does. So same thing. You just use the general export tab. And then click the export summary, and that means it will export the summary then, rather than the particular sort of parent load plan. So don't forget the summaries. I'm not sure I specifically mentioned that, but I should have. The summaries or the Analyze tab are specific for the load plan that you've defined them on. So you can see I have this summary number 1 here on this duplicate tab. If I go to the main table, if you just come out the options here. If I go to the main table or to any other tables, you can see I don't have that same summary available. Let me go to a different table. So there are no summaries defined on this group by, so they're not available here. So you have to make sure you're in the correct load plan to get the summaries, and therefore in Automator, you'd have to make sure you're exporting the correct load plan here. Obviously, this is a different workspace we're looking at, but if you have a workspace with multiple load plans, you'll see them all here. And you need to make sure you select the right one to be able to export the associated summary. Let me just review the questions, or if there's any more questions, please feel free to enter them. Okay, so yep, so I don't think there's any follow-up on that question that I'm seeing. So are there any more questions?
So I have a question, Steve. So with the color coding that you showed in the classic interface, is that something that is being discussed to bring over into DPS?
I've not heard it specifically mentioned, but I know the aim is to close the gap as much as we can between Data Prep Studio and Classic. But I must admit I don't specifically know that answer. So,
no worries. It's actually pretty fancy.
It's one of the drivers for still using Classic in some circumstances. In Data Prep Studio, you have sort of very little control over the fonts, and I don't know whether you noticed on the coloring options there. You can also do things like put subtotals in bold and make headings italic, and you have quite a lot of control. You've also got page headers and page footers, so you can put things like the current date and the name of the model, the name of the input file. You can put all these bits of metadata in page headers if you want to. So there's a bit more control over layout there from Classic.
Yeah, that's great.